The moment my wife, Kimberly, suggested I spend the evening alone at the house with her sister, Chloe, a professional swimsuit model who usually wouldn't give me the time of day, I knew the trap had been set. Kimberly claimed she had a mandatory girls' night to de-stress, but her eyes were darting toward the hidden camera she'd poorly concealed inside a decorative bookshelf clock. She wasn't looking for a night out. She was looking for a for-cause divorce settlement that would strip me of the real estate empire I'd spent 20 years building. She wanted me to slip up, to reach for the forbidden fruit, and she'd sent her own sister to be the bait. What Kimberly didn't know was that I've survived in the business world by always being 3 moves ahead of my enemies. And tonight, the enemy was sitting across from me at the dinner table, wearing a dress that cost more than my first car and a smile that was purely predatory. Before we reveal how I turned this twisted family betrayal back on the people who planned it, make sure to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment below. Have you ever had a partner try to set you up? Let's get into the details of the most dangerous game I've ever played. The house felt unnervingly quiet after Kimberly's car pulled out of the driveway. Chloe was already in the kitchen, pouring 2 glasses of an expensive vintage I'd been saving for a special occasion. She moved with a practiced, feline grace, her every gesture designed to be captured on that hidden clock camera. "Kimberly says you've been working too hard, Thomas," Chloe said, her voice dropping an octave into a sultry purr as she handed me a glass. "She thinks you need someone to help you. Relax. Someone who appreciates the finer things you've provided for this family." I took the glass, my fingers purposely avoiding hers. "I appreciate the concern, Chloe, but I actually have a very busy night planned. In fact, I invited your father over. He mentioned his laptop has been acting up, and I told him I'd take a look at it in the study." Chloe's hand froze mid-air, a flicker of genuine panic crossing her perfect features before she masked it with a forced laugh. "Oh, Dad, tonight? I thought he was at his poker game. Besides, I'm sure a big, strong tech-savvy guy like you can fix a computer in 5 minutes. Why don't we sit on the patio first? The moonlight is incredible tonight." I smiled, the kind of smile I use right before I close a hostile takeover. "He should be here any minute. He's actually quite excited to see you. He mentioned you haven't been answering his calls lately." The truth was, I had called my father-in-law, Richard, a man of old-school integrity and the source of the family's original wealth, 2 hours ago. I didn't tell him his daughters were plotting to ruin me. I told him I had a surprise for him and needed his help with a delicate family matter. Richard had always treated me like the son he never had, and I knew that if he saw the truth with his own eyes, no amount of Kimberly's spinning would ever fix the damage. I Ed Chloe toward the living room, strategically positioning us right in front of the hidden camera. I wanted Kimberly to see everything. I wanted her to watch her plan fail in high definition. Chloe, sensing the clock was ticking, decided to escalate. She sat on the sofa, leaning back in a way that left absolutely nothing to the imagination. "Thomas," she breathed, reaching out to catch the hem of my sleeve. "Forget about the computer. Forget about Kimberly for just 1 second. Don't you think it's a waste? All this power, all this success, and you're married to someone who doesn't even see you? I see you. I've always seen you. She was good. If I hadn't found the digital recorder in Kimberly's vanity drawer 3 days ago, I might have actually believed her." I could almost hear Kimberly breathing on the other end of the live feed, clutching her phone, waiting for me to lean in so she could call her lawyers and claim infidelity. "You're a beautiful woman, Chloe," I said, my voice projecting clearly for the microphones. "But you're also my wife's sister. And more importantly, you're Richard's daughter. I think it's time we brought him into the conversation, don't you?" The doorbell rang. Chloe bolted upright, her face turning a ghostly shade of white. The predator had just realized she was in a cage, and the man who held the key was the only person in the world she was actually afraid of. The chime of the doorbell echoed through the foyer like a funeral knell for Chloe's composure. She scrambled to adjust her dress, her hands shaking as she tried to regain the cool girl persona she'd been projecting all evening. I walked toward the door with a measured pace, feeling the weight of the moment. Behind me, I knew Kimberly was watching through that hidden lens, probably screaming at her screen, wishing she could reach through the airwaves and stop her father from stepping inside. I opened the door to find Richard standing there, carrying an old laptop bag and wearing a puzzled but warm smile. Richard is a man of the old guard, flannel shirts, firm handshakes, and a moral compass that doesn't bend for anyone. He stepped into the hallway, patting my shoulder. Thomas, sorry I'm a bit late. The traffic on the bridge was a nightmare, he said, before stopping dead in his tracks as his eyes landed on Chloe in the living room. Chloe, what are you doing here? I thought you were in Miami for a shoot. Chloe's voice was an octave higher than usual. Oh, hey, Dad. I came back early. Kimberly invited me over. She's out with friends, and she didn't want Thomas to be lonely. We were just catching up. Richard looked at his daughter, then at the 2 wine glasses on the table, and finally at her attire, which was far too provocative for a casual family catch-up. I could see the gears turning in his head. He wasn't a fool. He'd spent 40 years in the manufacturing business, and he knew when a machine was running hot. Well, it's good you're here, Richard said slowly, his tone shifting. I haven't seen you in weeks. Why don't you join us in the study while Thomas looks at this computer? Actually, Richard, I said, guiding him toward the study that shared a thin wall with the living room. The Wi-Fi is better in here, but I've got some documents to print out first. Why don't you get started on the laptop? Chloe, why don't you stay here and finish your wine? I'll be back in a moment. I led Richard into the study and closed the door just enough to leave a sliver of an opening. I knew exactly what was about to happen. Chloe was under strict instructions from Kimberly. If she didn't get the money shot for the camera, a kiss, a touch, a confession of desire, the whole plan was a bust. Chloe knew Kimberly was watching, and she knew her sister would hold the purse strings over her head if she failed. I walked back into the living room. Chloe was standing by the bookshelf clock, her back to me. She was whispering into her collar, likely to a hidden earpiece. He's here. Dad is here. What do I do? Kimberly, answer me. She jumped as I cleared my throat. She turned around, and I saw a desperate, wild look in her eyes. She knew she had a very narrow window before Richard came back out. She decided to go for the all-or-nothing play. Thomas, she said, her voice trembling but determined. She walked toward me, closing the distance until I could smell the expensive perfume and the cheap desperation. Forget about Dad. Forget about everything. I know you're unhappy. Kimberly told me. She told me you guys haven't been intimate in months. She said you were looking for an exit. She reached out and put her hands on my chest, sliding them up toward my neck, directly in the line of sight of the hidden camera. I can be your exit, Thomas. Just give me one reason to stay. I didn't move. I didn't pull away. I wanted the audio to be crystal clear for the man sitting 6 feet away in the next room. Chloe, you're talking about betraying your sister. You're talking about destroying a marriage. Is this really what you want? Or is this what Kimberly told you to do so she could take the lake house and the investment accounts in a settlement? Chloe laughed, a jagged, ugly sound. Who cares whose idea it was? You want me, I want this life, and Kimberly wants her freedom. It's a win-win. Now, stop being a Boy Scout and kiss me. She lunged forward, her lips inches from mine. At that exact moment, I didn't push her away. Instead, I reached into my pocket and hit the intercom button on my phone, which was linked to the high-end speakers in the study. Richard, I said loudly, my voice echoing through the house. I think you've heard enough. Why don't you come out and tell your daughter what you think of her win-win situation? The silence that followed my call to the intercom was heavier than the air before a hurricane. Chloe froze, her hands still draped over my shoulders, her face inches from mine. For a heartbeat, she looked like a statue of a predator turned to stone. Then, the heavy oak door of the study didn't just open. It slammed against the wall with a force that shook the frames on the hallway gallery. Richard stepped out, but he wasn't the smiling, tech-challenged grandfather who had walked in 10 minutes ago. He was a man whose world had just been set on fire by his own flesh and blood. Richard's face was a deep, terrifying shade of mahogany. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on Chloe, who had recoiled so quickly she nearly tripped over the coffee table. She stood there, trembling, trying to pull the straps of her dress up as if that could somehow shield her from the shame that was radiating off her father in waves. Dad, it's not what it looks like, Chloe stammered, her voice failing her. We were just. Thomas was joking, he was joking. Richard's voice was low, vibrating with a rage so deep it made the wine in the glasses on the table ripple. I heard everything, Chloe. I heard you offer yourself up like a piece of meat to destroy your sister's home. I heard you talk about settlements and lake houses as if you were negotiating a business deal over the carcass of a family. He walked toward her, And even as a grown woman and a successful model, Chloe looked like a terrified child. Richard turned his head slightly, looking directly at the bookshelf clock where the camera was hidden. He knew exactly what it was. I had shown him this smart home security specs months ago. And you, Richard growled, his voice rising as he addressed the hidden lens. Kimberly, I know you're watching this. I know you're sitting in some bar or hotel room, clutching your phone, waiting for a chance to ruin the man who has given you everything. Well, look at me. Look at your father's face. I stood back, watching the wreckage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Kimberly. I'm coming home. Don't you dare say another word to him. You've twisted this. I ignored it. The truth didn't need twisting. It was doing just fine on its own. Richard, I said softly, I'm sorry you had to hear that. I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to think my wife and her sister wouldn't go this far. Richard turned to me, his eyes softening for just a second with a look of profound apology. Don't you apologize to me, Thomas. You've been more of a son to me than these two have been daughters lately. They've grown up with too much and worked for too little. They think life is a game of gotcha and social media optics. He turned back to Chloe, who was now sobbing, her hands over her face. You're going to call your sister, Chloe. Right now? You're going to tell her that the game is over. And then, you're going to leave this house. You're going to leave Thomas's property, and you're going to find a hotel. Because as of tonight, the keys to the condo in the city, the one I pay for, are being turned over to a locksmith. Dad, no, Chloe cried, her voice echoing through the vaulted ceiling. I have a shoot tomorrow. I need my things. You should have thought about that before you tried to play Judas for a sister who would probably sell you out just as fast, Richard snapped. At that moment, the front door burst open. Kimberly charged in, her face flushed with adrenaline and panic. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Chloe. She went straight to the bookshelf, snatched the clock off the ledge, and slammed it face down on the table, as if killing the feed would somehow erase the last 20 minutes. This is entrapment. Kimberly screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. You set this up? You lured her here. Dad, you can't listen to him. He's been gaslighting me for months. He's cold. He's distant. I was just trying to protect myself. Richard stood his ground, a wall of integrity that Kimberly couldn't climb over. Protect yourself? By sending your sister to seduce your husband? By trying to manufacture a crime because you were too greedy to ask for a fair divorce? Kimberly, I didn't listen to him. I listened to you. I heard the way you talk about our family legacy, as if it's a weapon. Kimberly's bravado began to leak out of her. She looked at Chloe, who was a mess of tears and smirched makeup, and then back at her father. The realization was finally setting in. She hadn't just lost the house and the business. She had lost the only person who had ever truly protected her. I'm done, Richard, I said, stepping forward. The lawyers will have the papers delivered to your office tomorrow, Kimberly. And don't worry about the hidden camera footage. I've already uploaded a copy to a secure server. Not for the courts, though I'll use it if I have to, but for your father. So he never forgets who he raised. The living room, once a symbol of my hard-earned success and our supposed partnership, now felt like a sterile interrogation room. Kimberly stood by the table, her hand still resting on the face-down clock camera, her breathing ragged. She looked at Richard, searching for the soft, indulgent father who had always bailed her out of her little mistakes. But that man had left the building. Richard looked at her with a profound, weary disappointment that seemed to age him a decade in seconds. Dad, listen to me, Kimberly pleaded, her voice dropping to a desperate, shaky whisper. Thomas has millions. If we divorce normally, I only get a fraction. I was doing this for the family, for Chloe's career, for our future. I thought if I had leverage, he'd settle quickly and we could all be set for life. Richard let out a cold, hollow laugh that cut her off mid-sentence. For the family? Kimberly, you don't even know what that word means. Family is the person who stands by you when the world is falling apart, not the person who kicks the legs out from under your table just to see how much of the feast you can grab on the way down. He turned to me, his expression ironclad. Thomas, I want to apologize to you. Not just for tonight, but for the years I spent enabling this behavior. I thought I was being a good father by giving them everything. I see now I was just sharpening the knives they eventually used on you. Richard then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a second and then looked back at his daughters. I was going to wait until my birthday to announce the new trust fund structure. but I think tonight is more appropriate. Chloe, Kimberly, the inheritance from the manufacturing sale? The one you both spent the last 3 years already spending in your heads? It's gone. As of tomorrow morning, my will is being restructured. Every cent is going to the Children's Hospital Foundation. The scream that left Kimberly's throat was one of pure, unadulterated agony. You can't do that. That's tens of millions. That's our money. It was my money, Richard corrected her, his voice echoing with a finality that brooked no argument. Money I earned with sweat, while you earned yours with schemes. You wanted Thomas's assets? Now you'll be lucky to keep your own. I'm cutting you both off. No more allowances, no more emergency bailouts, and no more access to the family name. Chloe slumped against the wall, her modeling career suddenly looking like a very small, very lonely island. Kimberly looked at me, her eyes burning with a hatred so hot it could have melted lead. You did this, she hissed. You lured my father into this house to destroy us. No, Kimberly, I said, walking toward the front door and opening it wide. I invited your father here to witness your true character. You destroyed yourselves. You just needed an audience to make it official. Now, take your sister and get out. My lawyers will handle the rest of the communication. As the sisters walked out, Chloe sobbing and Kimberly staring straight ahead in a catatonic shock, Richard paused at the threshold. He shook my hand one last time, a firm, honest grip. I'm sorry, son. You deserve a life built on something real. I watched their taillights disappear into the night. The house was quiet again, but it wasn't the lonely quiet of a victim. It was the peaceful quiet of a man who had finally cleared the weeds out of his garden. I walked back to the bookshelf, picked up the clock, and dropped it into the trash can. The game was over. I had won, not just the money or the house, but my freedom. Author's conclusion. Betrayal is a poison that usually kills the person who carries it before it ever reaches the target. Kimberly and Chloe thought they were the smartest people in the room, using beauty and cameras as weapons, but they forgot that the most powerful weapon in any home is integrity. By trying to trap Thomas, they only succeeded in trapping themselves in a life without support, without inheritance, and most importantly, without a father's respect. Thomas's victory wasn't in the divorce papers. It was in his refusal to play down to their level, proving that when you stand in the light, the shadows eventually have nowhere left to hide. Thank you for watching this intense story of family, betrayal, and ultimate justice. If you want to see more stories where the truth wins and the schemers lose, make sure to hit that subscribe button, click the like, and tell us in the comments. Would you have involved the father-in-law, or would you have handled it differently? See you in the next one.